is overperforming compared to other countries, Panama, Colombia, Ecuador. And in this graph, you cannot see, but it's República Dominicana, which is the other fourth country that is going to grow rapidly after COVID. So that's also something that is important for our country in terms of opportunities. I was telling you about this graph, and here you can see it, real. This is 2.6% inflation rate for Ecuador compared to the European Union and really any other country in the world. This is a very small and manageable inflation rate. And as we are a dollarized economy and we are controlling the macroeconomic aspects of the economy, this is going to be one of the main aspects you can find in our country. Related to trade openness, our country, sadly, has not been particularly keen to open the market. We are an economy that has been closed, and actually 43% of our exports, only 43% of our exports are covered by trade agreements. So compared to Colombia, Peru, Chile, Uruguay, for example, just in Latin America or in South America, those countries have a trade openness. Each time we want to send products abroad, we have to compete in an unbalanced way. So that's why we're trying to reach this objective, and possibly this objective here, 80%. So at least during the next 3 years, we're going to have a coverage of our exports by free trade agreements of 60%, and ideally it will be 80%. How we're going to do that? Well, by signing a lot of free trade agreements with different countries in the world. And this is what we're doing here as well in Israel. Yesterday, we started an MOU with the Minister of Economy from this country in order to start the process towards having a trade negotiations that will lead us to increase imports and exports. In 2 weeks, we're going to have finished our trade agreement with Mexico. We're going to adhere to the Pacific Alliance, which is this bloc formed by other trade agreements that we're seeking to negotiate this week and the next months is China and South Korea. So by the end of this year, at least we're going to have 4 new trade agreements, as of course, we're going to start the process with Israel as well. And hopefully by the end of next year, we will have our agreement with Israel. That's the time frame that we're looking for. In terms of the products, you can see here the export performance from January to December last year. You can see United States growing pretty fast, 23%. China is our second export destination. Russia, sadly, of course, it's our third destination in terms of our export products. And this is going to create an important crisis, of course, for some of our products exported to Russia. Then you have Spain, you have Colombia, which are important. But I would just want to point out what's happening with shrimps. Shrimps, last year, just one product exported by Ecuador was $5.3 billion. And you can see the growth there, almost 40% growth in 1 year. And it's the same variable change that we expect to see this year with shrimps. So it's really booming and it's increasing in every single production. And this is due not to the increase in the pieces of land where we can farm actually shrimps, but because of innovation, technology. I invite you to understand a little bit more of the technology that we have been using in shrimps in Ecuador. It's really, really important. Bananas, canned fish, natural flowers, roses, lead, copper, gold. These are other areas in which you can find growth. As I was saying, Ecuador, sadly, in the last year has been a country that is mainly closed to foreign direct investments. And you can see here is Ecuador, these tiny little bubbles, compared to Colombia, Peru, and other countries that are even smaller than Ecuador in many cases. We receive less FDI, less foreign direct investment than other countries. Even being a dollarized economy, we're not receiving as much FDI as we should have. But this is changing in Ecuador. First of all, we're starting to see last year that our investors are going not only in the traditional sectors like mining or oil, which are also important, but also in manufacturing, business services, transportation, commerce, and agriculture. So that's what we're trying to do, trying to change the composition of that FDI in Ecuador. And this is what we're trying to do. Using all tools in a different way. So we have this law that is that was approved in 2012, so 10 years ago, and it's called the investment contracts. So basically, a firm that wants to invest in Ecuador can use this tool to put an investment contract and get a tax rebate or something like that, right? So last year, we already broke the record in terms of private investments in Ecuador, more than $2 billion. But now I want you to see what's happening now, this year. Instead of having more than $2 million last year, now this is the amount of investment contracts that we have signed over the course of the last 4 months. So more than $2.8 million, more than 161 number of new contracts, and this is completely changing the way we perceive innovation in Ecuador. So basically, 57% is foreign innovation, FDI, and roughly 40% is domestic. So domestic enterprises that are also investing. This is important. We want our local firms to thrive, to export more, to be more ready to produce and to have more value. These investment contracts are mainly located, for example, in aquaculture, shrimps especially. We also have here, let me see, energy, renewable energy, mining, the industrial sector, and also in tourism, in biotech, agriculture. We can see the rest of those investment contracts, which are also important. So almost $5 billion in investments over the course of the last 11 months. And we still have more to do during the rest of the year. So as President Lasso said this morning, this represents more than 6 years of investment contracts done just in 1 year. So that's the difference that we're trying to achieve. Finally, I just want to point out a few ideas in terms of our competitiveness agenda, which is really important. If you want to go to Ecuador, you want to know that you're not investing in sectors that look like islands, but clusters of innovation, clusters of development, so productive clusters. So we set a goal, which is in itself very, very ambitious, to create 20 different initiatives in the first year of the government that we call 20 cluster initiatives that are being implemented. So competitiveness is created through ecosystems, as you know pretty well here in Israel. So we are setting these different industries and trying to help them to look further. What innovation can be applied in those sectors? What are the value chains? And how they can collaborate in each sector between academia, between private sector and the government. So it's a real sectorial ecosystem in which you're going to be big changes in Ecuador. So if you are planning to invest in any of those, we are ready to support you and to put you in touch with all these business ecosystems in Ecuador. So we think that this is going to be the seed to see more entrepreneurship, more startups, and more innovation in the future. For Israel, this is the bilateral trade, and we think that this is going to completely change in the future once we have the free trade agreement. But for Ecuador, for example, fruit juices, canned fish, electrical devices, of course, chocolate and products from cocoa, agricultural conserves, other products, bananas, etc. And of course, in terms of the imports, the fertilizers, the machinery, the phones, disinfectants, pigments, instruments, and medicines, that's really important for our country. So this is Ecuador, a country that is really ready to do business now, and we invite you to learn a bit more and come to Ecuador to visit us. Thank you so much.
Okay, I was wondering how to talk about infrastructure, investment in public projects in the startup nation place. But I think that I find the way, because talking about infrastructure is about a big challenge of transforming a country. And everything, when you talk about transformation, it's about innovation also. And it's about to be bold, to think big. It's about to be perseverance. all the attributes that I have listened in these last 2 days talking about innovation and entrepreneurship. So we have something positive here. That is, we are highly inspired by the president, by our president. And we are also strongly connected with the project to transform a country, the project to create the best years of this alliance between these two countries, Israel and Ecuador, has never one Ecuadorian has thought before. We have plenty of opportunities, but obviously we can't do it alone. We are looking for partnerships. We are looking for the best partners that can contribute to complement this strategy that is quite different in how the Ecuador has been developed the infrastructure projects in the last years. Not in the last years, for all the history. So we have to transform the experience of the investors to ease the process and to create reputation that doing business with Ecuador, not just in the exportation side, but in the infrastructure projects, is not just a good idea. It's a must in your portfolios of investment. So saying that, what we are doing different today in the infrastructure creation in Ecuador, 3 big pillars that we have been prioritized. Number 1 is to create institutions that are focused and that are oriented to improve the experience of the investors. To create regulation that are more aligned with the future, not with the present or with the past. To have one of the most difficult challenges that we have in the public sector, that is to have results-oriented execution. Because the processes, they are like a machine that is not just too rough, but they have a lack of movement that we have to find the way to how to make this work and make these steps that we need to follow the projects. Having said that, it's important that how to create reputation, to create trust, and to create at least to have interlocutors to whom to talk. When you have many projects, as I'm going to show you, and you have many institutions and a lot of people, that some of them, the more comfortable way to manage their challenge is to do nothing. Because obviously, doing something in the public sector means take risks. How to take risks in this environment to create the opportunity that the projects not just float into the processes in the public sector, but obviously they're going to create the most important thing, that is to have clear projects, well prioritized, with a planning that support that, and at the end of the day, a system, a platform, not just to know what are the projects that are today involved in the pipeline, but what are the information, the key information of each of these projects, to follow them and to show to all the interested people to know them and to take decision about that. And the third, and not least, is about the financing. You can have the best regulation, you can have the best institution, but at the end of the day, the projects are not suitable for long-term finance. It doesn't matter what you have done before. So these are the 3 main things that we are working all day long to create a better kind of results for the future. So when we talk about regulation, it's about to modernize the norms, the standards, the law. Because as you may know, in the public sector, in the difference with other kind of organizations, or private organizations, you can do only what is regulated. So You have to find a way to have regulation that face that kind of challenge and do not stop what you have to do. So in the same time, we have to clarify the processes. We have to give more transparency to the process to create trust. We have to create a little more of efficiency to reduce the step numbers that you have to walk when you have the challenge to present or to approve a project. At the end of the day, we have some of the most important thing is to create the way to give more certainty, legal certainty on your contracts, on the contracts. So this is not for protect your incentives, to your tax incentives. We are talking about to have all the legal securities in your contract that usually have to manage long-term risks. We are talking about here contracts that have to last 25, 30, 35 years. When uncertainty is the standard, it's normal. How to do that with a contract that you signed it today? That helps about when you have some regulations that thinking about that, create all the initiatives, all the forms, all the standards to create predictivity, how to resolve uncertainty, or how to resolve differences, how to resolve conflicts, and to have more than one method of dispute resolution methods, probably 2, 3. In our regulation that we are preparing today, we had at least 3 or 4 instances to create that kind of trust, that if you have a problem, you have a difference, you have the way how to solve it without to reach expensive or very difficult ways to manage that. So the best part of this is that when you talk about result-oriented execution power, this is something that in this public sector, few people have this kind of capability. How to create this capability in the public sector? Probably we need more than innovation or more than just to say that we have a very bold desire to go through this. It's quite important to have capacities for coordinate between 5, 6, 7 different kind of institutions, mainly ministries. You can have the capacity to create a very kind of processes to sit together different kind of profile, different kind of capabilities in different sectors, not just ministers, but other regulators and other kind of stakeholders to sit together and to reach some agreement and some concerns. At the end of the day, they have to end up with the final effect that the transformation gives to the country. Is the investment is just a way to how to create employees. The investment is just a way, it's just an instrument of how to create prosperity. When we talk about infrastructure, we are creating not just employees, that is obviously our main objectives, but we are changing lives. When you are thinking about a highway, don't think about how many times we are going to reduce to travel one point to another point. It's how many lives we save reducing accidents. When we talk about the transformation in public projects about this hospital infrastructure, for example, we're not just making improvement about the services. We are here talking about saving lives in the hospitals. You know that in the COVID experience, more people died for inefficiency of the hospitals than for the COVID itself. And we are committed with that. So when we talk about projects, we are going to talk about not just employees, we are to talk about lives, to change and to create prosperity. And in this sector, in this projection by sector, we are talking about that in November, we present a a portfolio of projects, about $30 billion in investments. Now we are talking about $40 billion because obviously we have created a new opportunities. And mainly, what you may say, there are 5 sectors that is quite important, at least for the next 4 or 5 years, to transform the country, is to increase the level of production and the level of efficiency in the oil and natural gas sector. And talking about oil is not just improving the level of production. We are talking about also that the efficiency of the refineries could be increased in 100% to save money and to give this money to social purpose when really they need to go. In the energy sector, for example, mainly the renewables, 100% of the renewables, we are talking about nearly $9 billion in opportunities in some projects that we're going to see. In infrastructure, just to begin, just for the next 4 years, we're talking about almost $6 billion in projects, highways, the transformation of the railroads to change the way that we transport people, but most important, that we transport all the logistic of product and goods, and all the project, the output of the mining sector is going to give some outputs, increasing a lot for the transportation of the concentrated of copper, mainly in the industry of copper. So we find an indicator. They said each $1 billion in investment in infrastructure that create about 20 to 30,000 employees, directly and indirectly. So we are taking just the low base of the range, and we create, if we can initiate the works of this kind of projects in the next 5 years by $20 billion, we are going to create about 40,000, 400,000 or 500,000 of employees. And that will be a big contribution to the main objective to create $2 million of employees until 2025. When we talk about Israel, in this portfolio, how we fit better with the Israeli capacities and technology that you have developed. And mainly, of course, obviously, in the case of education, we can talk about health system. We have to talk about information, communication, telecommunications. We're about security. We're about water management. We're about energy. And something that is quite important here is to understand that when we talk about these sectors, each of these numbers have to be backed by specific projects developed with very accurate numbers and valuable information to ease the decision-taking process. So in that main way, we talk about energy, for example. This is one of the projects that is running today. It will be closed in the next few months. About 500 megawatts, all by non-conventional renewable block for energy, for electricity generation. When we are expecting in the next project that we deliver in this area to be complemented by other kind of non-conventional renewable energy, like geothermal, for example, or hydrogen. That we are quite open to receive that kind of options. In the case, for example, of the natural gas, Ecuador has one of the most potential to use natural gas instead of diesel or gasoline or something like that. And why? Because we haven't been working on developing our natural reserves in natural gas, and we today are committed to increase that kind of potential, making a process to attract investors, operators, to this kind of projects. When you talk about the hydroelectric, probably Ecuador has more experience in hydroelectric than others technology. The 90% today of our energy matrix come from hydroelectric. That is a renewable, but it's more traditional, let's say. So we have at least these of the projects, more important projects in size that have to be done in the next years. And in the same time, this is about 2,400 megawatts is one of the biggest that we will have in the country. And at the same time, we have the Cardenillo hydroelectric that will be in the public tender this year, at the end of this year, looking for, obviously, companies that will be involved in these processes. We talk about the environment. This is very special for the Israeli companies. In Quito, we have one of the most challenging projects is to create the best plants to have a treatment of the wastewater that Quito produces. This is one of the most important problems that Quito has. Obviously, we would like to have some startup about this, but we have to think big. And this is one of the most important projects that we have, creating one of the more expensive also. It's about nearly $800 million of investment that we need to solve this problem. In the case of health, we are creating the first experience in building hospitals with public-private partnerships. It's something that in other countries is something that is that exists, but in our country we are going to have the first experience in this kind of. But what we learned today here in this visit is that the infrastructure is not enough. Obviously, it's a big step, but it's not enough, because the infrastructure needs to be complemented by the intelligence of how to connect the hospital with communities, like Israel is doing today, to improve the services and to manage in a better way, not just the relationship between communities, people, and the infrastructure, the hospital infrastructure, but also improve the services in level that we cannot imagine today. But the other countries, they are experiencing that with highly good results. Well, in telecommunication, we have obviously some of the submarine cable, for example, that connect the continent with Galapagos. And on the other side, obviously, this is one of the most important projects to transform the transportation, the logistic transportation, and people transportation, or tourist transportation for this railway system that is about almost 1,000 kilometers that's across all the country, to give a better view of our potential in this area. At the end of the day, when we have the oil and gas, for example, we say, what is doing Ecuador doing this? When everybody is talking about renewables, low carbon. And the answer is very easy, because we have the resources to finance the transformation. The transformation is not cheap, needs a lot of resources. And Ecuador has those resources. So what we have to be is to be strong, to take leadership in our decision, to use it to improve the efficiencies of our refineries, as I mentioned, at the same time to create new kind, with new technology in the refineries to process this oil, to save money to the country, to invest in the social progress of the people. And obviously, at the same time, to increase our capacities to transform all the country using our resources, our capabilities, and the most important of all, thanks to the leadership that we have today in our president. Thank you.
I'm going to steal yours.
Yeah.
You have another two here. So thank you very much, Mr. Julio José Prado, and Mr. Roberto Salas. We heard here words about innovation, about renewable energy, and about solving problems. And I think this is music to our ears, not only to the people here, but also to all the innovators in the ecosystem that are watching us live currently. So in order to have a conversation, because we wouldn't be Israelis if we don't have a conversation here about how we can make this happen, I would like to invite our CEO, Avi Hassan.
No, that's okay. Okay, thank you. Can you pass me that? Welcome once again, to our new friends from Ecuador, Presidente, and to everybody listening to us. I think that was an inspiring vision, but we want to balance the act here. I think we have two folks from Ecuador. Let's invite one more Israeli to the stage, right? So happy to invite Boaz Albarranes from Mindset Ventures. Come sit with us. Okay, I'll let you present yourself in a minute, Boaz. So grab a mic. That was educational and inspiring. I think some Israelis have went through Ecuador mostly in their trip. Usually after their military service, and they certainly know a lot about the biodiversity and the great nature. But we just heard a lot about the economic opportunities, and I think I must say, as someone who spent a lot of time both in the private sector and public sector, I think you have what is needed, which is a vision and a determination to execute that vision. And for people who didn't read Spanish, by the way, there was a small print saying, "Juntos lo logramos." So together, we can make it possible. I know you're talking about your own people, but let me include ourselves in this game. I think together, both of us, we can make it. So I think it's obvious that Ecuador is going through a transformation, and it's diversifying its economy. It's moving to a more knowledge-based economy, and putting innovation, as a key part of that transformation. And in Israel, we've been doing that for a while. Innovation for us has always been an important part of our economy, and our innovators have brought cutting-edge solutions to the world. I think what we're trying to explore in this short conversation that we'll have is really some practical advices based on the experience of people here, of how can we work together? How can the two countries can collaborate, can complement each other? Not just G to G, government to government. How can we bring the private sector, the businesses, the innovators to do more business together and really leverage the opportunities that you just presented in order to strengthen our economies? So first of all, we've invited with us Boaz from Mindset Ventures. Boaz, maybe, I think Secretary Salas, Minister Prado, you introduce yourselves and your ministries. Boaz, maybe you introduce who you are and what you do.
So first of all, thank you for the invitation. Mucho gusto, Presidente and secretaries. My name is Boaz, and I'm a partner at a venture capital fund called Mindset Ventures. I think the reason I'm here is that we are strongly linked to Latin America, mainly in Brazil. And I think that we serve as a good example of how to connect between the two countries on the private level, you might say not only G to G. What we do is we raised most of our funds in Latin America and Brazil, but we invest in companies in Israel and the US. And the goal is afterwards to help those companies do business in those countries, because most of these Israeli startups don't know Brazil or Ecuador or many other Latin American countries, and they need help, and because they just don't know. And I think that if we invest and we come also with the knowledge of the local market, then we can help them do business. Today we invest from our third fund. We already have around 24, 23 companies in our portfolio here in Israel. About one quarter are doing business in Latin America. And thanks again for inviting me.
Great, thank you for joining us. So I think maybe that first point that you touched is a could serve as to begin our discussion, because the good news is that Israelis are very used to doing international business. Since we have almost no local market, by definition, will look to the global. But it's true to say that we traditionally look into the United States as our main partner, and obviously other markets as we evolve, and less so to Latin America. What I would like maybe to start, but here really hearing all of you, obviously there are differences in the culture, both the business culture and the culture of Israel and Ecuador. And I'd really like to hear from you. Can you give maybe some advice on what are the main things that an Israeli need to know about doing business in Ecuador? Some practical advices that can increase our chances to succeed.
Okay, thank you. It's a good question and a very practical one. So I will try to address it in a practical and pragmatic way as well. Well, first of all, what you need to understand once you see the broad picture in Ecuador is that really, and I'm not inventing this, and I'm not augmenting this, Ecuador is a country full of opportunities. Of course, the traditional opportunities in the agricultural sector. We have some of the best products in terms of agriculture and food in the world. Sadly, one of the biggest problems that we have had in the past is that we have the best products, but we don't have the best markets, and we don't have market access to get into those markets where we can put our excellent products. On the other hand, in terms of manufacturing industry, there's a thriving industry, there's great manufacturing, there's an industry related to wood, to textile, to mining industry, to tools, to machinery, which is also really important. And of course, services, we're not that big enough at the moment, but it's growing. So the practical element here is that once you go to Ecuador, I think it would be great to incorporate your culture, your technology to the products that we already have. So don't try to create a new sector. Don't try to invent the wheel. Do what you have done here in Israel, in the agri-tech sector, in the food tech sector, in the energy sector, and innovate with what we have and bring that to the next level. In the past, in the last 15 years, there was a couple of governments in the past that tried to create clusters, innovation clusters from zero. So believing that we could become Singapore or Hong Kong or Silicon Valley. And they forgot what we already have in Ecuador and how to bring that to the next level. So that's, I think, what you can add to our products in Ecuador.
Thank you, Secretario.
It's working, yes. If you want to invest in the public sector in Ecuador, I have 3 suggestions. Number 1, just call me. We have been created by our president.
You have just done a huge mistake. You have just done a huge mistake. Israelis will call you. They will call you.
I'm expecting that.
Okay.
I'm very open to that because that is our job. Because if you don't have a first level of contact, you will be lost with all the regulation, all the ministers, all the time that you can imagine, you cannot imagine. So it's too easy that. Open the door that will advise you, will guide you, and will give you the open doors that you need to present your initiative. Number 2, I learned a wonderful word today that is made this tactless. Go direct to the point. Because if you are looking for what the country offer, you are losing time. Prepare before. What do you have to offer to Ecuador? Or what Ecuador is offering, because they have one of these projects that you can add value there. And if you got that clear, I think that your experience will be best. And number 3, and I see that is one of the probably the most difficult part, is to be perseverance and sometimes passion. Because we are changing how we can speed up the processes in the public sector in Ecuador, as I mentioned. But this is a long-term job. But at the same time that you are doing that, we are going to be very close to you to not you feel alone. You always will have something with whom to talk. and to solve the problems.
Was.
So, working in the region, I will just extend what two secretaries said, is that first, as Israelis, you have to always understand that, at least this is how we call it in Brazil, that your product should go through some tropicalization, because what you sell in the US or in Germany is not 100% what the region needs, so maybe 80, 85, but there's some need of adaptation. The second thing is a local partner. We strongly suggest not to go alone. This is what we serve to our companies, but always go with someone local. And the third is what Secretary Salas said, is that the relationship building is of extreme importance. It might take some additional time in the beginning, but it will pay off afterwards because of the strong relationship. Because then, as every business, you have some good times, you have some bad times, that's part of life. But your real partners are staying also on the bad times. And when you build strong relationship that lasts, this is, I think, the main goal of working with Ecuador.
Thank you for that. And Boaz, maybe I continue with you. As a good Israeli, I'm disregarding my notes. Because I think you would try to give some advice to the Israeli companies, coming to Ecuador. But interesting to hear your point of view based on your experience. What are the Israeli companies looking for when they enter into this market?
So I think, as you mentioned, look for international expansion always, right? So here it's small, there it's big, then we're looking to do business there. What I also think, at least in the beginning, in more earlier stages of companies, is also feedback, not only business. I'm not only looking to sell, I'm looking for partnership, looking to hear what you think. I'm looking to additionally develop my product or improve it. Hence, I need a lot of feedback. And the third, I think, is maybe being blunt, as Secretary Salas mentioned. I think that, on one hand, you have to dance the dance. On the other, you have to be well understood and to share what your real intentions are and not trying differently. And the last thing maybe is that it's not only about innovation. Innovation is important, technology is important, but go-to-market is so much more important. The cemeteries are full of companies with the best technologies, but with not good enough go-to-market. So this is of extreme importance, especially in those markets.
Yeah, if I can offer my own perspective, I will just tell you, Israel is a very tight community, and honestly, nothing speaks louder than success. And I think if we, and I'm talking about all of us, create those success stories, people will follow. I think you're sending a very strong message here about being open for business and creating that infrastructure. I think as we create those early successes, news will travel very fast and people will follow. So it's really about finding those first opportunities, maybe that might be more lucrative or suitable. And I'm wondering, going back to you, based on the short time you've been here, but I heard from the president it was a very busy short time. So you managed to see a lot. If you have to speculate, and obviously, where would you identify those opportunities? Saying, based on what we've heard and what we know of Ecuador, here are some of the best paths that potentially, could create us those early success stories.
Yeah. So probably just adding to the conversation that we were having in terms of what might be interesting in Ecuador for Israeli firms and entrepreneurs, is that I think our country is a pilot market for your firms. Because if you go, of course, to the United States, you have a huge ecosystem, but it's a huge country. Europe, Brazil, Argentina, they're two big markets, and two big markets to fail. But Ecuador is a small market, and then you can fail fast and understand the market, but apply the technology really fast. So we have been seeing companies, foreign companies, multinational companies, going to Ecuador to experiment. And this is something that I think for your culture of experimentation, of innovation, of technology would be something really interesting in our market, in our country. The second part of your question related to what specific sectors, I think from what we have seen here, absolutely right. Agriculture, agrotech, for sure, that's a win-win situation for us. As I said, we have excellent products, but we're not very innovative in those products. So taking those raw materials and convert them and adding value, innovate in those value chains, I think that's going to be a game changer for Ecuador and for Israeli firms that have already done that here in your country. The other sector, of course, is, and I'm running into Roberto's field, but it's renewable energy. We have seen very many firms that are very active here, and now just in 3 different renewable projects in Ecuador, in these investment contracts that we have signed, we have made up more than $500 million in the last months from FDI companies, multinational companies. So that's a sector which I think is really important. And then fisheries, shrimps, the aquaculture sector. Ecuador is also a big potential and a big player in the world of fisheries in the world. So those 3 actually I think are really important.
You know, I have to make a confession, because my expectation for this visit was overcome a lot. I didn't expect to find so many opportunities in sectors that I haven't identified before. Obviously, we had an agenda. Yesterday, I visited one of your most important companies in the geothermal electricity generation. Probably we are going to announce in a few weeks one of the commitment of investment that Julio Jose will be very happy for this firm, because they are very close to initiate some proposal to Ecuador. But at the same time, when I met different companies yesterday and today, and they say, we learned that the health infrastructure, for example, as I mentioned before, is nothing compared with the intelligence that you add to that infrastructure to serve better the patients, the people. I think that that is one of the biggest opportunities that I have found in this trip to Israel. Company that I prepare using artificial intelligence, using big data, data science, to connect communities with hospitals. I think that was something that surprised us. The other thing that I think that would be very important is in the security technology. That is obvious, because we have a big challenge on that. On top of that, I think that there is one of the biggest opportunities in Ecuador is natural gas. Israel has more experience than that we have in natural gas. We are initiating that big potential, but with potential we don't fit our people. We have to convert those potential to reality. And obviously, this knowledge that you have can help us a lot on that.
Boss, maybe you can share a concrete example of successful collaboration.
Yeah, so obviously agriculture is a very good example. We have quite a few, maybe 4 companies in our portfolio who are doing ag tech, and maybe a couple that are doing a lot of business in the region are one called C-Tree and one called Taranis. C-Tree is a company that is doing intelligence for trees, for permanent crops, meaning the agriculture, the farmer is planting them and they should serve him for 30, 40 years. So he has to take good care of them. And today, usually this is done by plots. So you take a plot of whatever, 1 dunam, 1 hectare, 1 acre, and you try to understand what's going on there. What this company is doing is a kind of a collection campaign in which they collect data of the trees from satellites, from airplanes, from drones, from tractors, and basically create a health record for each tree. So similar to what you said we are doing in the health system, same for the trees. So each tree should know if it's sick, if it's healthy, if it lacks of water, if there's any issue, how much production. It serves as a production unit. And they're doing very well, both in citrus and almonds, but also today, which could be relevant in carbon credits, how to measure the footprint of a tree. And the second is Taranich, which is focusing more on field crops, on potatoes and soy, etc. And same, those usually are very large areas in which the farmer find it very hard to control and to understand what's happening, especially in the middle where you just can access. And what this company is doing is similar in the sense that it can detect things on the leaf level from a satellite or in plain image to understand what's the status of the field and basically increasing yields. So
And
these
both,
are
and
two
both companies are active in the region.
are very active in
You
the
should say
region.
that.
Correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Definitely here at Startup Nation Central, a lot of the sectors that you mentioned are within our focus sector. Agro-food is such one, healthcare that was mentioned here, as well as climate technologies, including renewable energies, because we see them as future growth engines, and we also see them serving global challenges. So while we serve all the 7,000 plus companies and happy to introduce them, we've been seeing a lot of growth in those sectors. Gentlemen, we're nearing the end of this discussion. I think the message was very clear. I think it's clear that Ecuador is open for business. I think it's clear that it's seeking partnerships with the Israeli ecosystem. It's probably the first time I've heard anyone inviting Israelis to be more tachlis. Again, you know, be careful of what you wish for, Roberto, but that's okay. I mean, we'll be putting his phone number at the end of the presentation.
The ambassador Herling has my phone number.
Not your phone number, don't worry.
There you go. But I think, and I'll be finishing this and handing the mic to our very distinguished guest in a minute. But I think he said it before, and I hope I'm not stealing his thunder again, that this visit's in many aspects, there's a before and there's an after. And I think it's in many dimensions, but we are people of action. So, you know, let's try to make this visit really a marking point. And hopefully in a year or two, we'll see much higher numbers representing the growing collaboration of our two countries. So thank you very much. Thank you. You are right. You are right.
It's hard controlling Israelis. So with all this conversation, there's a lot to add, but just for the sake of time, the only thing that I would like to mention is that what Boaz said about giving feedback, this is exactly what Israelis are hungry about. We need this information in order to be able to do these partnerships. We will make sure that these problems are addressed through innovation, but we need you to share that. So I want to put the cherry at the top of the cake and finalize this event with welcoming Mr. President Guillermo Lasso to give the final speech.
Yo creo que se han metido en problemas dándome nuevamente la palabra. Les prometo que saldremos a las entre 11:30 y 12 de la noche. Este es el Ecuador de hoy. Este es un Ecuador de cambio. Es un Ecuador donde en los últimos 12 meses hemos logrado cosas impensables. Haber vacunado al 88% de la población con 2 dosis, después de que el gobierno anterior nos dejó apenas al menos del 5% con 1 dosis y sin vacunas. Haber logrado la incorporación del Ecuador al CIADI para dar una garantía a los inversionistas extranjeros en el Ecuador. Haber logrado cambiar la tendencia del crecimiento económico. Íbamos rumbo al 2.2% y lo cambiamos al 4.2% con 7 meses de gestión. Haber logrado lo que hemos logrado ayer, la revisión, la 4ª y 5ª revisión del Fondo Monetario Internacional sobre nuestra economía. Por primera vez en la historia del Ecuador, mantener un acuerdo con el fondo a pesar de que hubo un cambio de gobierno y haber logrado desembolsos por digamos, en junio por $1.000 millones del fondo y cerca de 2.500 millones de dólares más por otros organismos multilaterales. Haber sacado de la pobreza a 750.000 ecuatorianos y haber creado empleo a 350.000 para 350.000 personas en el Ecuador. Haber creado un crédito que seguramente muchos emprendedores van a valorar, no solo en Ecuador, sino en el mundo, al 1% de interés y hasta 30 años plazo, como un capital semilla para comenzar tu emprendimiento. Todo esto lo hemos hecho en apenas 12 meses y contra la incredulidad de muchos. Como decía en la mañana, este es un proceso como quien arma un rompecabezas. Todos tenemos en el gobierno nuestra visión. ¿Cuál es el cuadro que queremos construir? Y las piezas que debemos de ir moviendo en cada momento y en cada instante. Ese es el Ecuador de hoy. Un Ecuador de oportunidades. Un Ecuador que se puede presentar al mundo con una lista concreta de proyectos de inversión, tanto en el sector privado como en el sector público. En el sector público o sectores estratégicos, ustedes pueden acceder a la página ecuadoropenforbusiness.com y ahí tienen el catálogo completo de proyectos en el campo de los hidrocarburos, en el campo de los minerales, en energía, en telecomunicaciones, en infraestructura y también en otra variedad de activos, como por ejemplo un banco comercial, el segundo banco comercial del Ecuador de propiedad del Estado, que espero salga a la venta en pocas semanas. Ya no hablo de años ni de meses, sino de en pocas semanas. Este es el Ecuador de oportunidades. Roberto Salas dice que lo llamen a él, pero pueden llamarme a mí también. Y con mucho gusto, yo los voy a atender. Miren, quieres hacer la traducción, pero había traducción simultánea. No. Bueno, la verdad que te mandaron de penitencia para mí. Sigue tú.
טוב, אני חושבת שנכנסנו פה לצרה, כי אם נתתם לי שוב את זכות הדיבור, אנחנו נצא מפה ב-11 או 12 בלילה. אבל אני רוצה לדבר היום על איך אקוודור השתנה ב-12 חודשים האחרונים. 88% מהאוכלוסייה חוסנה בממשלה שלי, עם 2 מנות. וזאת לאחר שהממשלה הקודמת השאירה אותנו עם 5% בלבד של מחוסנים ובלי חיסונים כלל. אנחנו הצלחנו ליצור שיתופים חדשים בהזדמנויות להשקעה. שינינו את הגישה שלנו, נפתחנו להשקעות, וכל זה ב7 חודשים. אתמול השגנו הישגים משמעותיים, במיוחד בענייני השקעות עם ארגונים בינלאומיים. אנחנו השגנו ב7 חודשים האחרונים, הוצאנו 750,000 אנשים ממצב עוני. יצרנו 350 משרות חדשות. נתנו הרבה הזדמנויות חדשות ליזמים, במיוחד עם ריבית של 1% ל-30 שנה, שזאת הזדמנות נדירה, וכל זה ב-12 חודשים בלבד, וכנגד כל הסקפטיות. התהליך הזה הוא כמו פאזל, ולממשלה יש חזון, איך להזיז כל חלק, איך להרכיב את הפאזל, ואיך לעשות את זה בכל זמן נתון. אנחנו פתחנו הזדמנויות שיאפשרו להציג את אקוודור לעולם כמקום להשקעה גם בסקטור הציבורי וגם בסקטור הפרטי. מי שמעוניין להשקיע באקוודור בסקטור הציבורי מוזמן להיכנס לאתר של Ecuador Open for Business ותמצאו שם קטלוג שלם של הזדמנויות בסקטור של אנרגיה, של תשתיות ובין היתר. במיוחד בבנקים. יש לנו את הבנק השני בבעלות הממשלה, והוא יימכר בעוד כמה שבועות בלבד. ואגב, אתם יכולים להתקשר ישירות אליי, לא רק לשר. אני אתן לכם את הטלפון.
Este es tuyo. Parece que ha sido mi sombra durante toda la tarde. Haces bien tu trabajo. En todo caso, amigos, es poco lo que yo puedo añadir a lo que he dicho en la tarde, a lo que hemos escuchado de Julio José, a lo que hemos escuchado de Roberto Salas. El Ecuador es un país de oportunidades. Yo solo quiero cerrar diciéndoles que también es un bello país para visitar y para vivir ahí. 4 regiones muy bien marcadas, muy bien definidas. Pero, y ahora, sigo nomás. Javi me dice que siga nomás. 4 regiones bien marcadas. Ustedes pueden desayunar en la costa, almorzar en la sierra, cenar en Amazonía y a primera hora al siguiente día salir para Galápagos. Pueden ver todo en un territorio pequeño. Es uno de los países más mega diversos del mundo. Pueden disfrutar del mar, de las montañas, de la selva, de Galápagos, y realmente es un sitio hermoso para vivir. Quito tiene el centro histórico más grande y mejor conservado de América Latina. En la Sierra Central tenemos unos nevados extraordinarios y tú puedes llegar a un hotel de 5 estrellas y levantarte muy temprano y admirar el Chimborazo, sentir el frío y el olor a páramo. Igual lo puedes hacer en la costa, al pie del mar, mirando el Océano Pacífico, con unas playas extraordinarias. Probablemente todavía no he visto las de Tel Aviv. Me han prometido llevarme por la calle al pie del mar para poder admirarlo. Pero también tienen en la Amazonía una selva maravillosa, productiva, donde puedes sembrar aguacates, cáñamo, cacao, café. Puedes sembrar muchos productos y lograr una buena rentabilidad. Por supuesto, lo que dice Julio José es cierto. Tenemos muy buenos productos, lo que nos hacen falta son más mercados. Y por eso nos hemos planteado esta política internacional de más Ecuador en el mundo y más mundo en el Ecuador, que lo que hace es resumir una conexión comercial y de inversiones de Ecuador con el mundo. Así que los esperamos en el Ecuador. Ha sido una jornada intensa el día de hoy y los últimos 2 días realmente maravillosos de pasar aquí en la Tierra Santa de Jerusalén. Tienen un lindo país. Mientras escuchaba a Javi, me hacía una sola pregunta que te la voy a hacer a ti. En todo este panorama tan positivo y extraordinario, más allá de los riesgos que ya están conocidos, ¿cuál es la preocupación de ustedes? No tienes más de 30 segundos.
No, yo sé que preguntan no para dar la respuesta, pero como israelí le voy a dar la respuesta. But I'll do it in English, Presidente, okay?
Okay.
With our former president, Shimon Peres, you know, a great statesman, once said that the greatest contribution of the Jewish people to the world is dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
He said, if you show me a Jew who is satisfied, he is probably not a real Jew. Now, this may be troubling if you are the president, but it's very good for innovation. So we're always dissatisfied. You ask me about what I'm worried about everything. We need more than everything, you know? And the worst mistake that you can make as an innovator is to be arrogant enough to think that the success of today will ensure you success tomorrow.
Muy bien. Gran respuesta. Muchas gracias, Javi, por esta invitación. Gracias a todos ustedes por haber tenido la paciencia de venir a escucharme. Y les ratifico con los brazos abiertos, serán bienvenidos en el Ecuador. Muchas gracias. Te agradezco muchísimas gracias.